You're listening to The Rundown Live with Kristan T. Harris. Your protection from deception. Your forecast into the future. The Rundown Live. Kristan T. Harris. Your protection from deception. Your forecast into the future.
You know, the best way of removing negativity is to laugh and be joyous. So I'm delighted that there's so much laughter in the audience tonight.
But they're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine.
They built cities using a language you were never taught to read. Cathedrals, monuments, even dollar bills. Everything is written in sacred geometry. This isn't aesthetics. It's frequency engineering. The ancient masters and hidden orders understood. Form shapes energy. The golden ratio is the barcode of creation. The system uses this geometry to capture your attention and channel your energy into their egregores. They want you living inside gray concrete boxes, disconnected from the divine proportions of nature. Outside of sacred geometry is to live in disharmony, and a soul in disharmony is a weakened soul. Recognizing these patterns is reclaiming the key to the temple not made of stone, but of light. Except the code is everywhere. You just need eyes to see. Comment code or access the link in bio. Decode reality inside the From Ego to I Am portal.
What if everything you experience is a projection from a deeper, non-local field? At the deepest level, all that exists is a continuous field of quantum frequencies, where every possible state exists in superposition. This field is what we call the singularity, also known as the non-local field, where everything is connected as one system. Between each tick of the universe at the scale of Planck time, everything returns to this superposition. When waves of probability overlap and reach a limit of information density, they collapse into black holes. What you experience as the world appears as a reflected projection on a boundary called the horizon, like a movie in a mirror. This projection turns something non-local into something local, which is why space and time appear the way they do. At the horizon, quantum fluctuations form particle pairs, where one falls inward and the other remains encoded on the surface. Nothing escapes carrying information, instead the surface stores it, like grooves on a record. Hawking radiation acts like the needle, reading those grooves and writing the experience as an entangled reflection. In this framework, prime numbers represent the frequencies that survive and remain stable on the horizon. Now think of the field like a connect-the-dots drawing, where all the dots are stacked on top of each other. Those dots are entanglement nodes, and their strength determines how they connect when projected. Stronger entanglement creates shorter connections, and weaker entanglement creates longer ones across the horizon. When traced, these paths recreate Einstein's geodesics, so gravity and motion come from how they are read. Inside your brain, microtubules act like tiny quantum registers that read this structure like a QR code. The entanglement nodes are the code, and your microtubules are the scanner decoding it into experience. Everything still exists in the non-local field, including you, but your brain acts as the horizon that renders it. Like code and a video game screen, They look different, but they contain the same information. So reality is not a place you reside, but a process you participate in.
God created exactly 6 planets at precisely those distances from the sun because the 5 platonic solids, when nested inside each other with spheres between them, perfectly determine the spacing of planetary orbits, proving that God designed the cosmos as sacred geometry, and that the universe is structured through mathematical beauty, and that astronomy and mysticism are the exact same pursuit because discovering cosmic mechanics means discovering divine thought made manifest in physical law. This is the Mysterium Cosmographicum, the cosmic mystery, and understanding Kepler's vision reveals why the greatest scientist of his era spent his life searching for harmony in the heavens, why he believed mathematical perfection proved divine design, and why he thought the solar system was a geometric diagram teaching humans about the mind of God. And with that, there's no better place to start than with the platonic solids. Only 5 three-dimensional shapes exist where every face is identical, every angle equal, and every vertex the same. The tetrahedron, which is 4 triangular faces, the cube, which is 6 squares, the octahedron, which has 8 triangles, the dodecahedron with 12 pentagons, and an icosahedron with 20 triangles. Plato assigned these to the elements, fire, earth, air, ether, and water, claiming that they were the fundamental building blocks of reality. The Pythagoreans consider them sacred because they represent perfect mathematical symmetry made solid. These 5 solids can nest inside each other. Place a tetrahedron inside a square, place that sphere inside a cube, place the cube inside another sphere, and continue through all 5 solids with spheres between them. You create 6 spherical shells with 5 geometric solids spacing them. Kepler realized that 6 known planets, 5 gaps between them, 5 platonic solids to fill those gaps, and it could not be a coincidence. Let's talk about his cosmic model. Kepler's book shows detailed diagrams, the octahedron between Mercury and Venus's orbits, the icosahedron between Venus and Earth, and the dodecahedron between Earth and Mars, even the tetrahedron between Mars and Jupiter, and the cube between Jupiter and Saturn. He calculated the ratios, and they matched. Not perfectly, but close enough that Kepler believed that he'd discovered the blueprint that God used when designing the solar system. The spacing between planets wasn't random, it was a geometric necessity. This explained why exactly 6 planets exist. Not 5, not 7, but 6, because there are exactly 5 platonic solids, creating exactly 5 gaps, producing exactly 6 spherical orbits. The number of planets is determined by mathematical necessity. God is geometer, the cosmos is sacred architecture, astronomy is reading the divine blueprint. Kepler made no distinction between science and theology, because discovering how the universe works means discovering what God thought when he was creating it. Now a little more on the harmonic law. And I hate to break your bubble, but the platonic solid model was wrong. Planetary distances don't actually match those ratios precisely, and more than 6 planets exist. But Kepler's mistake led him to his greatest discovery. Obsessed with finding cosmic harmony, he spent decades refining calculations until he discovered his 3rd law. The square of a planet's orbital period equals the cube of its distance from the sun. This mathematical relationship, unlike the platonic solids, actually works perfectly. He'd found genuine cosmic harmony, but through different mathematics than he had expected. The universe operates through numerical relationships, but not the specific geometry he predicted.
A miracle is like extreme synchronicity. First of all, if you believe in miracles, you'll experience them. If you don't believe in miracles, you'll never experience it. It's the same thing with anything in physics. Whatever you don't believe in, you will not experience. So, it's like if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. The world is not about believing, or seeing as believing, it's believing as seeing. There are 3 types of people: people that believe in miracles, those that don't believe in miracles, and those that, and therefore never experience miracles, and those that understand and know that life itself is the miracle and you are the miracle.
Well, the story just keeps getting bigger. There was a time not long ago that if you mentioned life on other planets on television, on a show like this, people would laugh at you. Tinfoil hat, right? They do that deliberately. The country is different now. Many people are now paying attention to this and taking it seriously. We now know there were at least 12 scientists and military officials tied to UFO and nuclear research who have gone missing. Last week it was 11, now it's 12, all mysteriously, including Matthew Sullivan, an Air Force veteran who was set to testify about UFOs on Capitol Hill, but died mysteriously of a drug overdose just moments, check that, months before the hearing. And according to Congressman Eric Burleson today, quote, a young scientist named Joshua working on the nuclear technology we'd need to reach Mars turned up dead in a Tesla crash after his car drove 2 hours by itself on rural Missouri back roads, then crashed and burned his body beyond recognition. Nothing suspicious about that. Several members of Congress are now questioning what's happening. The family members are asking questions, including Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett, who has been very vocal and very honest about what he thinks is going on. Congressman, good to have you back. This scientist died because his Tesla drove 2 hours. This is from the police report. 2 hours on its own, crashed and then burst into flames. If that was true, nobody would ever buy a Tesla again, Congressman. What do you think happened here?
Enki came to Earth along with the Apkallu, or 7 sages, which mirrors the depiction of Shiva with 7 sages in Hindu iconography. This parallel highlights a striking similarity between the two cultures. One of the most intriguing parallels between Shiva and Enki is their association with serpents, symbolizing their roles as bearers of divine knowledge and transformative power. Shiva is often depicted with serpents coiled around his neck and arms, representing Kundalini, the primal energy that, when awakened, leads to spiritual enlightenment.
When I'm in the sleep paralysis state, it's almost like there's another me inside of me. My body becomes literally like my tomb, a sarcophagus, and I could move this other body within me. So as I'm like in this sleep paralysis state, I'm like going back and forth, like tossing and turning, basically hitting my body like it's some outer shell to wake up. So one night I'm just struggling, trying to wake myself up, you know, in the mind screaming, move your hand, move your finger, move your leg, get up. And I shook so hard that I popped out of my body. And I found myself, just like in near-death experiences, I could see my body. It's a very odd feeling.
You're listening to the Rundown Live with Kriston T. Harris. Your protection from deception. Your forecast into the future.
Because of this administration, we are tonight a world divided. We are a nation becalmed. We have lost the brisk pace of diversity and the genius of individual creativity. We are plodding along at a pace set by centralized planning, red tape, rules without responsibility, and regimentation without recourse.
Madam Speaker, I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous?
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan.
Promise of being one of the most effective treatments for AIDS and cancer in history. Now it's gone, and one of the most respected research facilities in the country is being blamed.
Participation in a process that validates an establishment that never meaningfully changes. What if that establishment doesn't want and doesn't have the consent of the governed? What if the two-party system was actually a mechanism used to limit so-called public opinion? What if there were more than two sides to every issue, but the two parties wanted to box you into a corner, one of their corners?
Censored by the mainstream media, the destroyer of fake news, and your host of the Rundown Live, Kriston T. Harris.
You're listening to the Rundown Live, Milwaukee's independent news and talk radio. I'm your host, Kriston T. Harris. We have a great show, as always, lined up for you. But before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and plug some of the people that make this broadcast possible. Shout out to Clyde Lewis and the Ground Zero Plus Radio. Ground Zero Plus Radio is a great spot where you can get this broadcast. And by the way, congratulations to Lisa Shermer, who received a free annual subscription to Ground Zero Plus. We ran a raffle for anyone that donated to our May Day platform fundraiser that we had on Friday, where we dove deep into esoteric secret societies, We had some experts on MK Ultra and satanic ritual abuse. It was an 8-hour marathon. So if you haven't checked it out and you have a long day at work, it might not be a bad idea to plug in the earphones and really review that day. It was a great day, a lot of fun. We raised a lot of money. But moving forward this week, anyone that donates, I will personally match out of my own money whatever is donated. And we will be doing another raffle at the end of the week on Friday to help build and grow this broadcast on therundownlive.com. And you can do that. You see that little QR code. I think it's out that side over there in the corner. You're going to scan it with your phone and go to the Give, Send, Go. Donate. And if you donate, like I said, I will match out of my own pocket towards the broadcast. And yesterday we also had some donations. So I want to shout to everyone out there. Thank you for supporting this broadcast. And thank you to the people over at Ground Zero and all the other people in the past that made this possible. And that's, the old schoolers. Remember Truth Frequency Radio and Truth Broadcasting. And then later on when we added ourselves to KGRA Radio Broadcasting and now Ground Zero Plus, we keep growing, guys. And it's because of you guys and your interest in this broadcast here today. Today we have a very special guest that will be joining us here in just a few minutes. Jason Quitt. He's an author, mystic, energy healer, and multi-dimensional experiencer. But last night I binge watched a bunch of his interviews, and I, you know what, I had to sit back and kind of just like I was just like watching. One of the shows I watched was Fade to Black. And that's with Jimmy Church. And if you've never heard Fade to Black, I was on the same network as him for many years with KGRA. And, I've never been like a huge Jimmy Church fan, but I really enjoyed the episode. I started sitting back and they were talking about, I think it was like around the Thanksgiving. They really dove into a lot of things that I wouldn't consider so woo-woo, but just how all these conspiracies that we've been talking about for 15 or 20 years are coming true. And one of the questions that was thrown out there is like, what's next? What do we talk about now? It's like we've talked about all these things and now they've come true. Well, what are the next real deep dives? Or in the music industry is when I worked, you always wanted to hear the deep cuts, the things that you don't normally hear. When you go to your favorite band's concert, you want to hear those tracks from the first 2 albums they never play, right? Those are the deep cuts. Well, now we're moving forward and we're looking at the future. And this broadcast has been always about planting seeds in the garden of your mind so you can grow healthy ideas, giving you all data, right? And that's not to mention that for a completely different reason, I'm in the news right now, all over the place for my coverage of Minocqua Brewing Company and what was going on there as an investigative journalist. So it's funny how my worlds have collided. So I have this great show where we talk to all these amazing guests. We learn together. And then, I have my investigative journalism side where I'm reporting and covering things on the ground for news agencies, and it's really interesting altogether. But when we talk about things that we have to look at in the future, I mean, there's so many things. Today we're going to dive in probably to astral projection, right? I've been interviewing a lot of people and MK Ultra survivors who went through government testing, getting acid put in their mouth every day on their way to school by their mom. How would you feel about that? You're getting ready to go to school as a kid and mom's like, hurry up, you got to get your acid trip before you go into school. I don't know if I'd like school more or less. I'm not quite sure, but I've never done acid, so I guess I wouldn't really know. But we had Chris Latour on, former MK Ultra survivor, Elisa E. We've had so many. I think we've had 4 or 5 now on this broadcast. And so we're going to probably go a little bit down that avenue. We're going to talk to Jason a little bit about his journey and how he decided he's going to research astral projection and science. How is science catching up to these things? We could talk transhumanism, post-genderism. There's all these topics we could dive into, but let's just ask him on. Let's bring him on the broadcast right now. We have Jason Quitt. Welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us on the Rundown Live. And, I was really interested in seeing a lot of your interviews because I hear these things like astral projection, and the only thing I can equate it to in my entire life is sleep paralysis. And you nailed it. Like, you were talking about sleep paralysis, and you're trying to wake yourself up, and you're trying to move. Some people see shadow people. Some people see black orbs. Some people say nothing, but they can't move. And then you feel like you snap out of your body, and all of a sudden you can move again. And astral projection is kind of like that, except you snap out of your body and you can kind of see yourself. But first, let's start with how did you get involved in all this? Because not everyone's like, yeah, I'm going to be an interdimensional traveler and we're going to just go ahead and travel in our sleep,
Well, simply, it was happening to me very often. And we're going back to like around 2002. Okay, so 2002, 2003, I was working in like a recording studio with a friend of mine. And, you know, who do you talk to about this stuff? Back then, there wasn't a Google. I don't think Google was there. I think I was using like Yahoo search engines.
Well, you definitely don't want to talk to the government because then you end up in some MK Ultra project.
Right, right. So I found myself entirely alone. I had to go to like the library and try to find books on these subjects. And I actually found a group called, it was the Canadian Dowsing Group, or a Canadian Dowsing Association. And they were like full of psychics.
What is dowsing for the listeners that might not know? I know what it is because I hung out with Andrew Collins a couple years ago, and they brought out the dowsing rods to find magnetic poles. But I want to know what your description or what they are to you guys. What do you understand dowsing is?
I was introduced it by my cousin who's a psychic, and she's like, here's a pendulum. You know, you could ask yes and no questions and see where the crystal or pendulum moves. And I got pulled into this association in Canada here where groups of people would meet, talk about dowsing. And I found that they were very open, very spiritual. In fact, that's where I met Robert Gilbert. We're going way back, like early 2000s. And so I started to get involved with his group, the Vesica Institute, met Dr. Kareem, learned about sacred geometry and biogeometry. And I started to kind of open up to those groups because it was like my people. Everybody was talking about spiritual things. And I started to talk about my astral projections and, you know, what was going on with me and, you know, going off to different courses with shamans and trying to learn how to navigate these worlds. And as I would talk to people in the class who became my friends, they would kind of push me and say, you know what, this is good stuff. Like you should stand up and you should talk about this to people. So that's how I got started in this community, is just by like sharing my experiences way back when I thought I was alone and nobody else did it. But then I found out very quickly that they were all doing it to some degree. So I just started to follow this, write my experiences down, share them, because I wasn't really attached to anything. Like I wasn't attached to any religion. I wasn't attached to any books or anything. I was like just purely experiencing these things and trying to document what was going on, what was happening. And the craziest thing about these experiences is through different out-of-body experiences with different types of entities like shadows you were talking about, other types of beings would come and wake me up in my room. And some of those beings you would describe in what people experience in abductions. So this is what kind of pulled me into the UFO community, because I was having these experiences where, you know, I would see these praying mantis beings. You know, I would see beings that you would call like reptilian, or I would even see greys. And for me, this was all shamanic out-of-body experiences. It wasn't abduction at all. It was me leaving my body and they're standing in the room. So it's, for me, it was between these worlds. It's not like a physical thing. It's when you leave in this out-of-body state, suddenly you have these experiences with these beings, which can be very, very real. It's very difficult to, if you've never done this before, it's very difficult to separate the physical world with the spiritual world.
I mean, that whole experience is interesting because you're sitting there, and how do you like differentiate that this is a dream or it is not a dream? I guess it's because you're kind of in that hazy gray segment of waking up and falling and being asleep. And it's interesting, like you mentioned, you've seen things. I've seen like big shadows, like when I've woken up. They happen once or twice. I grew up in a very Christian household, so I immediately associated it with like a demonic attack per se, because that is the feeling I had. It was darkness. I didn't feel good. I felt scared. I couldn't talk. You couldn't move, you know, and I felt like I was screaming, but nothing was coming out, you know. And so like people don't understand quite a bit about this, and even science is trying to find, rational explanation. Some people believe it's like hallucinations. But I guess the question is do you have interactions with other people ever while astral projection? And do they have, like, is there a way to astral project and meet somebody, hang out with them, talk to them, and then have them have full understanding and be able to repeat what they experienced with you? Or is it something that seems to be a solo journey?
Well, one, for me, I'd be very jealous of someone that could actually just project and be there. And
it's not that easy, I guess.
It's not that easy. In fact, it's like you have the will to do it. So you could get into that state, let's say through meditation practices or even through sleep paralysis. And I would even say sleep paralysis is you entering the astral world. You're just still in your body. You haven't broke it free yet, but that mind that's speaking inside the body when you're paralyzed, that's literally your astral self in that in-between state. But when you leave the body, I would say there is always a control there. So the moment you leave, it's almost like you're being watched or guided. And if you try to do something you're not supposed to do, they whip you back in your body. All right. So it's like there is this type of control mechanism is what I found. And it's any time that I try to take control, say I leave my body and go, oh, I want to do this, or I want to see this. Boom, right back to the body. Wake up. It's only when you try to shut off your mind completely and just observe the experience. It's almost like your consciousness is put onto the astral body. So it's like the astral body itself has its own consciousness. It's kind of like, how do I say this? Peter Pan's shadow. You can't catch that shadow. But it's like, you can't control that shadow. So it's like once you connect your mind to it, you have to stay very silent and just observe. And then suddenly you become almost like a passenger. And then you go and experience these worlds, you go experience these things. But the moment you try to take control of that situation, it ends very abruptly.
Well, it's interesting to me that you mention this because then I got to ask, because there are government studies on this that discuss that the human body is a container, right? Some top secret government psychological studies that they believe that the body is a container. If the body is a container, then that would mean that you could potentially take your consciousness and move it into another body per se, right? And now we're getting into all sorts of folklore and fantasy novels and everything else, but when you astral project, I guess, what would be the main purpose? What would be, like, first of all, we talked about like how it happened to you, but what would be the government's interest in something like this? Why would they have interest in? Because whenever I talk to these MK Ultra survivors, and I don't know if you know a little bit about me the last couple months, I've been taking it upon myself to better understand satanic ritual abuse and just ritual abuse in general. It doesn't have to be satanic. And MK Ultra survivors, most of them say that they were drugged with some kind of hallucinogen, including acid, but they were really interested in teaching them how to astral project. What kind of benefits would something like that have for our government?
That's a really good question. And I kind of go to the kind of dark spectrum.
Well, it's okay. It's like we got to have the real conversation. We got to have the good in with the bad. Otherwise, people can't make honest decisions for themselves.
We're talking about a world outside of ours that basically, I would say, manifests here physically. And when you enter that world, there's different entities, different beings. These are the same type of beings that I guess occult science, magic, things like this, they're trying to connect with these beings for power in this world. It's almost like calling on the elementals and actually wielding them. It's like you're making that bridge from the physical to this kind of spiritual world where there are entities, you can call them gods, demons, angels, they exist in this place. And for you to make contact with them or to have, let's say, favor with them in some certain way, you can actually make changes in the physical world. And when you're talking about vessels, now this is really important and really dark in the same space because, when I first started to leave my body, I would say the first couple of years is me fighting entities. It's almost like, you go to sleep and then they come into the room and they're trying to like pull the astral body out. It's terrible. Like, it's like they're trying to push themselves in your body, like take you out, put them in. And I know people that, let's say they do too many drugs or get blackout drunk or have these extreme traumas, like you're talking MK Ultra. Well, there's a being just waiting for you to crack so that it could just take you out easily, step in, and then now they control this vessel.
Well, that's very interesting. And I'm going to kind of piggyback on something. I used to tour in a Christian punk band in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I listened to Coast AM, right? We'd be driving late at night, and there'd be like just crazy stories on there sometimes. But one of them is about a guy named Stephen Gibbs. I don't know if you ever were familiar with Stephen Gibbs, but he invented something called the hyperdimensional resonator, which was a magnetic coil you put on your head, and that would allow you to astral project very simply and very easily. And when this actual item was shown to people who allegedly, we're gonna put quotes, allegedly were involved in MK Ultra projects such as the Montauk project, they freaked out and they said, "I know what that is. Get that away." It's a very dangerous and powerful item because it amplifies your consciousness. It amplifies your ability to astral project. People sell them to this very day. By the way, Stephen Gibbs died, I think, like 2 years ago, and he sold hundreds of these. Some of these people became millionaires. They claim to have known the future. All sorts of interesting things. Just a weird side story, but it kind of fits in just because of the fact that he said that when you would astral project, that there's a good chance he would call them demons or another spiritual being would then inhabit your body. And in order to get it out, you would have to do some kind of salt ritual or something. I forgot. He explained it in his writings, but it sounds a little out there, but I'm trying to express to people that like there's something going on here. Like obviously there are people that have their bodies possessed. I think there is some logic to that. We see it in the religious sect with like demon possession and casting out demons. You hear about it in the ancient worlds with the jinn, or you hear about it with Christ casting demons into pigs, right? Because they had to inhabit something else.
That's right.
But they were consuming people or they were inhabiting people, and then they're cast out and people seem to get their life back. Whether or not there's science to back that, it's something that we've learned through not only mythology, but theology and real life experiences. I read in the news it's interesting. In the news, you'll see mainstream media report about like possession of people and them levitating off their bed and the police being called. And at least like 5 or 6 times a year, there's a exorcism that makes the news. It's really interesting. But these things happen is what I'm saying. There's stories of these. And I think it's interesting because when we talk about our government, what could they use it for? And, just like a scrying mirror, you hear about these elites like, now this is secondhand, right? Elites like Soros having scrying mirrors in his home, and people that were moving his stuff out were posting it on the internet that, what is this black mirror? Well, technically we all have scrying mirrors. We call them cell phones though. But, it depends on which way you look at it. But the whole idea was to look into the mirror, conjure up spirits, and then make good with them so that they could be prosperous in this life or wield some kind of power or manipulation over others. And if the government would have access to these deities, well, our government wouldn't be the first one to have done such a thing or have interest in it. I remember there was this German group, these groups of Germans, the Thule Society and the Vril Society. They had a very similar idea of mixing the esoteric with science.
And you bring up a good point about the police. And I actually knew someone whose father was, let's say, like the chief of police. And remember, where a lot of the Freemasons located in the police force.
Well, that's where they get the blue lodges from. They'll say it's blue because they have to pay dues, but it's really called blue lodges because of the idea that most of the cops in the 70s and 80s and 90s had to be Masons. And even to this day, the Fraternal Order of Police was founded in Pennsylvania and is a Masonic organization.
And so when I was talking to them, they were saying that they know all this stuff, all this occult stuff, and that they know that, let's say, like when a child gets like possessed and they kill their parents, it's like the police come in, they understand this. They need to take the child and put him in a mental institution for the rest of his life because they're afraid that this entity may use him again. But they understand what really happened, but they can't tell the public that.
Well, and that's interesting. I have a pair of friends who do a show called UAPPD, but they really talk about a lot of the strange things, and that's one of the things that they encounter are like haunted homes, people that have weird. They wake up and they got claw marks all over them, and they cut their body, and maybe they're doing it self-inflicted. Who knows? But like there's this whole realm. I lived in a home for listeners out there that don't know, and I was sitting in my living room, and every cupboard of every drawer, everything in the kitchen opened up at the same time. Like I wasn't in there. I was in the living room and I heard this big bang. It was like a ball hit the door and I heard a whole bunch of stuff rattle in the kitchen, and I went in there and all my drawer, like I have my hair standing up on my arm because whenever I tell this story, like that's what happens. I don't know. Everything was open, and then I saw the kitchen doorknob turn and there was no one on the other side of the door. And I'm like, well, I had a couple of questions. I just was wondering, maybe it's interdimensional beings, and I wonder if when I move things in the kitchen, does it fuck up things in their reality? And they're like, oh, there's a ghost in my house too, but how does it work? What is interdimensional world? What is the astral plane? Is that the dark matter that forms that galaxy and world? Because what I'm understanding is basically it's interdimensional travel at the end of the day.
I think it's kind of like the in-between realm between the physical and the spiritual. It's kind of like the bridge realm is what we would call the astral. And sometimes I like to even call it the mind of God. It's like the astral thought plane. So, what we're talking about, egregores, for example, like these emotions, these thoughts put together, praying to certain gods or demons or angels, they manifest physically, or I wouldn't say physically, but like astrally, in these realms, and they hold tremendous power because, the Gnostics, you can say, you're sending or they're taking your loosh, or it's because you feed these beings in this world and they become stronger and stronger. So if you're weak, and this is one of the messages that, I write about and talk about, is that if you're energetically weak, you're very easily to be manipulated by this world. Very easy. Because you're going to think that it's your thoughts. You're going to think that it's your emotions that are coming through you. It's not. There's a thing that's literally just feeding it into you and guiding you down this world by their hand. But then it's like, okay, I'm going to take control of my energy back with different practices, let's say like Qigong or meditation or esoteric practices where you're reclaiming and taking your energy back from this world. And then it's almost like they give up and they kind of keep their distance until you screw up and they smack you over the head. So it's lots of very interesting things. But going back to this whole idea of thoughts is that we really don't know our spiritual power at all. And you have this collection of the world, we're kind of brought into this world believing certain things, let's say worshiping certain gods. And because of that, those things are very, very real. So if someone talks about their religion or their gods, it's not something that I can, push away and say, oh, that doesn't exist. Because it's at a certain level, it actually does exist in these types of astral worlds. And this is where you get these spiritual attachments or entities, and you have to learn how to navigate those worlds to release them. Just like the shamans or the exorcists, they can pull these things out of you. But we're basically taught that this stuff is not real.
I don't remember which 80s, like Indiana Jones-esque movie, if it was Romancing the Stone or Indiana Jones, but where they were at like a shaman and he's like pulling scorpions out of their belly. You're getting like you hear those stories and those legends come from somewhere. And these evil spirits manifest themselves in a physical way. But yeah, it's a very interesting topic, I think, for a lot of people out there, because we're being so saturated with this information and we don't know what to make of it. And in a world where everything seems to be a lie, there's so many people that are just deciding what their own truth is. And that's okay. I'm fine with people deciding what they want to believe. The problem is a lot of this information that we've gotten over the last, 15 years, 20 years, is a lot of it could be just propaganda, and like I ask questions like, why do starseeds accrue over 1 billion views, but if I make a documentary interviewing 50 first responders from 9/11, nobody will see my documentary. But starseeds who believe that I call them sometimes trans alien. Not that I don't believe that there aren't indigo children, or like we're discussing, like your spirit can leave your body and maybe inhabit another body or things of that nature. I just saying that's what the government wants to promote. That's what the algorithms are promoting. And I'm like, why is it? And then you start to think about Operation Bluebeam. I mean, we're just saturated with all this information. And at the end of the day, I do know that I've heard plenty of stories, especially working in the rock industry. People have played in bands and been on drugs and seen themselves perform live and stuff like that. I've never been interested in drugs. I've never intentionally done DMT and talked to clockwork elves, which is another deity that a lot of people see out there. But when we start looking at like astral projection, it's a very scary feeling when it happens. And being able to use that to communicate with other deities to help direct a person, could we subconsciously be talking to ourselves?
Absolutely. I could say that there's probably multiple aspects of the self, and at those higher aspects, you can be in communication with them. And it may not even be a you from here. So it may be you from some other dimension that you will not be able to recognize. And when you said scary, it's scary. I always joke that it's only scary the first 500 times, but that's not true at all.
It's the first 600 times.
It's the first 600 times, because even the other night, and we'll get into my MK Ultra and stuff, but the other night I was just exhausted. I had a terrible day of just traveling and everything, and I jump into bed just to go to sleep. But when you have those really traumatizing days and you're really tired, going to sleep, and I don't go to sleep. It's just you kind of switch out into that other world, and suddenly there's 3 beings surrounding my bed. I don't know what's going on. I just want to sleep, and you freak out. So even me last week freaked out. And and then when you wake up the next day, you're like, man, maybe I shouldn't have freaked out. Maybe I should have been calm and say, who are you? What are you doing here? But this goes into this whole MK Ultra stuff, where to access certain places or to see these things, it's sometimes you really have to be sleep deprived. Sometimes you really have to be sick or in trauma or something to kind of, something clicks in your brain where it doesn't follow the same algorithm. Instead of going to sleep, it clicked me into this, and I wasn't ready for it. And people have these spontaneous things happen to them all the time. And, I know people personally who, under stress or certain situations, they'll start having entities talk to them, telling them to do things they don't want them to do. And it's why does this happen? It's because their body and mind is put under tremendous stress from physical world, physical labor, whatever it is. And because of that, now something is opened up in their energy where these beings can now communicate, and it's usually not for good.
Well, and then you wonder where all the mythology around evil spirits and deities come from, and maybe people all throughout our whole history have had a history with these energetic deities or these monsters or whatever you want to call them. And there's an interest in order to guide our population into allowing access for these deities to come on over here, because when you read these ancient books, whether it's the Bible or other religious texts, or we'll call them theological texts, or mythology, you always hear the story that they want access into our realm. They don't have a physical body. They're trapped in a prison, and their whole goal is to get over here. That's the genie in the bottle, right? The genie wants to be let out of the bottle. You rub the bottle. It gives you 3 wishes, and those wishes are always a curse. And then your final wish is that you would just want things to go back to the way they were before you even met the genie, and there you are, right? But at the end of the day, you have these deities, whether they're called demons, right? They're called jinn. They're called shadow people in a lot of indigenous cultures. You have these experiences that humanity has had throughout generations, and they might actually steer the outcome of geopolitical, the geopolitical sphere. We saw it, Aleister Crowley, that's the most famous, like the first gray painting of a gray alien was potentially Aleister Crowley. I know that there's other things, and you'll get into the ancient alien lore and these images that are carved into walls, and there's something to be said about that. At the same time, I do believe like majority of life on this planet is dead. So who knows what kind of animals and deities and people or types of living animals we had that they were drawing on the wall. But I think it's, when it comes to the use of our government and getting people to astral project to communicate, not just for government purposes, you got remote viewing, right? That's something that is linked to astral projection, I guess. What is remote viewing for our listeners out there that don't know?
Well,
isn't that what Project Looking Glass was about?
Well,
I remember
there's many levels to remote viewing, and it depends on the skill quality of the individual. But, a lot of times it's like in a meditation, they can close their eyes and it's almost like a movie screen where they can like just travel with their mind and see literally like a screen in their mind of all these locations. But then you get the really, really good ones who it's like astral projection, where it's like you give them a location, they literally astrally go there, walk around and describe and listen to the conversations. And, if you're training like psychic spies, for example, I mean, that would be pretty incredible stuff. You can't hide from that.
No, you can't. And it's interesting because when I communicate with some of these MK Ultra survivors, they talk about how our government has their own psychic defending spies, like they prevent them from accessing secret government operations and government buildings. And you hear this stuff, and it's like this would make a great movie script. But how do we verify and validate? And the only way you can do it is either through what I would call extreme coincidence, where they say something and it comes to fruition, right? They saw something, this is the way it was. And then you have to start asking questions, because if there's a trend, then there means there's science behind it. There's a reason why things have happened. But at the other time, we don't know. How do you differentiate between what's dreamland and what's astral? And there's all these questions around it. But our government definitely had an interest in astral projection. They definitely had an interest in remote viewing. And you're right, as spies, they could gather a lot of data and information. And not only that, trends of the future, should they go into war with things, they could start asking these spirits for wisdom. And as we know, our world is run by a very weird elitist, almost like Myron C. Fagan in the 60s called the synagogue of Satan. But essentially these people that believe in these occult practices, they believe in the direction that the occult deities are bringing them, and they're fully immersed in trying to use science to explain it. Which brings me to my next question: what are your thoughts on things like CERN? Oh, okay. So we hit a nerve.
No. It's okay. No, I was just going to add that, like, when it comes to energy, if you're going to ask for something, let's say you're communing like the government or something, you're saying to these beings, I want to know something. Or you hear stories of somebody, having a disease, and a being comes to them and suddenly they're free of that disease the next morning, like they're healed. So that would be a really positive experience from these beings.
And angelic, like a lot of people would associate that with angels or God or positive energy.
Right. But what people don't understand is that there's always a cost. No matter if it's positive, like you say, the genie in the bottle, where they give you your wishes, that whatever, if you think it's positive or negative, it doesn't matter. There's still a cost to you or someone close to you. And this is like a very old concept. It goes to like ancient shamanism, where they have this kind of communication with the spirit world always. And this is why they're always blessing and giving tobacco. They're always blessing in ceremony and ritual, and like literally giving the spirits offering. Here's some food, here's some water, here's some tobacco and some alcohol. Like they do this constantly because they know that if they don't do that, the cost is going to come from them. Something bad is going to happen. Something's going to be taken from them. So even with all the good that comes out of this, there's always like a cost. And I don't think people understand that. They think the whole woo, all love and light. No, it's really not. And even if you receive love and light, there's a cost to it. Everything has to be brought into balance. So this is like an understanding that I think the government knows, that ancient shamans knows. And this is where you hear of like the sacrifices or the offerings, or, why do they do that? It's because if they're going to ask for something big, they need to exchange the exact same energy to balance it out.
Well, that makes a lot. Like, now you just helped me solve kind of a mental question I've had that I didn't know that I would get an answer to in the show, because I wasn't expecting that. So like, I've been doing a lot of research into witchcraft and occultism, for the fact is to better understand what these MK Ultra victims are going through. And one of the things that I learned throughout witchcraft is if you cast a spell, or let's say it's a love spell or any for prosperity, there's a trade-off. There's an energy that will, and if you wish harm on somebody, that energy comes back to you sometimes twofold. So you're going to wish harm on someone, well, you're also going to get harm back. It's like the demon gets like a double dip of like gratification out of your life, And so when you talk about these things about energy, and when you are trading off things with these spirits, it's never, it's always deceitful. It's crazy. Not always, like you mentioned, if you get healed, maybe somebody dies or something. And that's always been the Illuminati, per se. We're going to use the term Illuminati to describe our current, New World Order government complex. But, the whole ritual of witchcraft, that they have to let you know what they're going to do to you before they do it. That is part of a ritual of expectation. And it's the same thing that they know that when they do something to you, that energy is going to come back unless they know how to deflect it. Like you mentioned, giving tobacco or sacrificing a child, or doing mock child sacrifices in front of Minerva at Bohemian Grove, because that's a cool thing to do if you're a politician these days. Why not? Let's go piss in the woods and, do mock child sacrifices in Masonic robes, and, worship the druids. And I'm not saying like, listen, you can worship anything you want. And if you want to do a mock child sacrifice, that's fine. I probably won't let my kids play with your kids, because that might be a little bit weird if you have a huge stone owl in your backyard. But, when you start talking about people who take it to the next level, like we had that big director that was on Joe Rogan recently talking about, there's 8,500 Baal worshipers and there's sacrifices going on all day. Well, that's the trade-off. You hear about, I think it was Miley Cyrus that was sacrifices a chicken every day. I can't remember what it is. I'm not going to go into it, but I know that it happens. I know people in Hollywood, and I know weird things happen out there, and there's people that believe a lot of these weird things. But it makes sense that there's that trade-off, that agreement that they made, that there's a trade-off and they want something in exchange. That's the devil at the crossroads, right?
It is. And, there's this ancient tradition where it's like, they say, you're cooking and stuff, and then you start dropping food. It's like you just randomly start dropping food, and you're like, why did I drop that? Or why did that fall off my plate? It's like, that's kind of like the messenger, the spirit world saying, it's time. It's time for your offering. So you go, oh, shoot. So it's called a spirit plate. And I think this is where the whole spirit cooking idea came from. But in ancient traditions, it's called a spirit plate, where you're like, oh, okay, the food is flying off my plate, I'm dropping things. Okay, so I'm going to take a plate and make it for the spirit, and I place the food outside, And by doing that exchange, you're like, okay, that karma or whatever that buildup of energy is just flattens. But if you don't listen, then, something could happen. You could cut yourself with a knife, or you could trip and fall. There's something to just, and then they go, oh, okay, now I extract that energy from you.
That's very interesting. How far back do you think these studies on astral projection go? Because one of the things in researching you, I realize, is that you're very well versed in like Egyptian mythology, historic sacred geometry of the Egyptian culture. And, you know, vibration was very important to them. A lot of the symbols we get are because they had sand on plates and they'd put vibration or sound from instruments through them and it'd make shapes. And they found a lot of those to be sacred shapes, amongst other things. But there's a lot that goes back here because the reason why I ask is I think back to the book of Genesis where they're giving sacrifices, right? Either one was an animal sacrifice and one was allegedly a vegetarian plant sacrifice, and the gods rejected one. They rejected Cain's, and Cain was mad, so he killed Abel. That's at least the theology behind it. And I'm sure that might have come from some Sumerian text or even further back, some other Atlantean text. Who knows at the end of the day? A lot of Christianity is borrowed from Egyptian, mythology and a lot of the rules like the Ten Commandments. It's interesting.
Didn't Abraham take his firstborn up the mountain to kill him?
Well, right. So why is it like now we're getting to some deep questions. Why is it that they were doing that in the Bible?
I think the same reason as before is that you have this kind of this very strong connection to that spiritual world and those beings that are in it. And it's almost like they had to appease it to live a normal life because it was so active back then. And there's no things to distract them like in this world. Back then, it's like you were living in the world of nature. You were pulled along by if there was a drought, if you couldn't eat, if someone kidnapped or destroyed your village. It's like you were kind of like in this chaotic stream, and the only person you could turn to is basically the gods and say, "Why have you forsaken me? What do I need to do to make this right?" So it's a completely different mindset back then. But when it comes to this astral body thing, and maybe even hallucinogenics, because I believe there is a lot of evidence that they would use these in religious circles back then, is that's what they would do, is they would take these drugs or go into meditation or go into darkness like sarcophaguses and leave their body and then commune with these gods and ask them, what do they need, or what do I need to receive? What do I need to tell the people? So it was almost like that used to be the spiritual internet back then. It's like, okay, it's time. We don't know what we're doing. Go into meditation, convene with the gods, and then come back and tell us where to go next.
Well, I think moving forward, that's why I think that the teachings of Yeshua, some people believe him to be Yeshua ben Pantera or other individuals with a similar, there's a bunch of Yeshuas that were around at that time, saying that you don't need to sacrifice animals. We need to stop doing that and need to stop like sacrificing things in general. And I think it was very controversial because it was opposite, because those deities, they want the sacrifice, they want that energy, and Jesus was like, no, we don't need to sacrifice things anymore. And so that's, I think, part of the symbolism of him being an ultimate sacrifice, although astrotheology is a whole nother thing we can get into. I studied under Jordan Maxwell for several years, and I knew him all the way up to the last day. He was a man of a lot of information and interesting viewpoints. I may agree with him on a lot of things and not on a lot of other things, but like the idea of astrotheology goes back thousands of years. It might be the oldest story ever told because you look on the like a lot of these ancient carvings on cave walls, and it's the constellations. And why the importance of astrology? Because when I think astro, that's astral projection, and then I think astrology and astronomy. So how is it that those three words, when I think etymology, how is it that they're all like, how do they work together?
Well, what is astral? Astral means star.
Yeah.
Okay, and it comes from this, I would say it comes from Egyptian because it's kind of like the furthest back, but it goes into like Plato's era and the Greeks, where basically their vision is that you are basically a star. And this is like the whole basis of star seeds, is that you are basically the light of a star. That's what your astral body is. It's a star body. And that every star in the heavens, it's basically you are one of those stars. every individual on this planet has a matching star for their astral body. And when they die, that astral self, that star body of themselves, will travel back to their home planet, their home star, not home planet, I'll say home star, to live as an immortal god again. And this goes back to, as far as we go back to, let's say, the pyramid texts, where the pharaoh dies and he has to travel to the northern heavens, to the immortals, the immortal stars, because they never set below the equator. They're always in the northern sky. And when you get to the Greek era, they believe that as well, is that when you die, you're going to go back to your star. So it's like the different religions with astrotheology, they veil it in a different language. But when you study all these different things, it comes back to this same story, like the most ultimate story of all time, which is the movement of the stars has a reflection of what's happening on Earth, and that's how the stories exist. So, for example, if you go back to even like the Babylonian star calendar, it's like you have the field, which is the square of Pegasus, and right next to the square of Pegasus, you have Aries and Trilingam. Anyways, my brain's not braining today.
No, it's all right. It happens. It's not Monday, but it feels like it.
But basically, it's like the working man and his tool. So you have the working man and his tool working in the field of Pegasus. So when you see those stars in the sky, well, get to work in the fields. So it's basically matching what's happening on Earth. Okay, you got to like plow those fields or plant your seeds when you see a Taurus in the sky. So you get your cow, your bull, and they'll start working the fields. So you would match what's happening on Earth with what's happening in heaven, so that it's almost like you don't need a calendar. You just look up and say, oh, this constellation is above my head now. That means it's this work to happen on the planet.
Well, that's what some people believe. The stories in religious texts, they all have that similarities of the deities in the sky, and they all match the zodiac signs or the houses of Lord or the Mazzaroth, and it's basically helping how they spread along and taught the story of how to plant, when to plant, how to survive in this planet, and they esoterically embedded it in this beautiful piece of artwork, the greatest story I ever told. It's interesting when you talk about luminaries and stars, because my mind completely went in a different direction, but it's on point. What do we call the celebrities in Hollywood? We call them movie stars.
Yeah.
Why do we call them movie stars? Unless they're in control of what we do in our fashion, function, and forms of entertainment, of propaganda, of the seeds that we plant in our mind and the echo chambers we build, because we don't seem to have original thoughts anymore. We just regurgitate what celebrities say, what stars say, and then at the end of the day, that's what we become. We become part of that energy, and that's what we are known for. The Milwaukee Brewers fan. He was the biggest Brewers fan. Green Bay Packers. He's the biggest Green Bay Packers fan. And, for you guys, it'd be hockey up there in the me and you have almost the same accent because I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin there. So, but you guys have hockey. Hockey's huge, but at the end of the day, that's what you're known for. That's what you become. And, at the end of the day, who are you giving your energy to? I guess that's the moral of the story. And how do you know, which way to go? And I guess there's a lot of direction I think people should have before trying to astral project, but I don't think people sometimes have a choice. It just happens.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to experience it in our lives, if we like it or not. Every single person will experience it. And going back to the stars, it's like, if you go back to the most ancient cultures, they worship the stars. And like you were just saying, now we worship other stars.
Movie stars, baseball stars, football stars. It's like the Colosseums in Rome. So, and those are the new deities that will live on forever. The Brett Favres and the Ted Williams and Mickey Mantles and Satchel Pages and Jackie Robinson and all these individuals, Morin Moons, and you could go on and on. These are the people that they want you to pay attention to instead of looking within what we need to do to change our own heart and our own self and to find real motivation. It's basically a big distraction at the end of the day to really redirect our energy and our soul into a different direction that probably isn't godly at all. And it always says in the Bible, if you ever read that book, that it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than it is for a person to enter the gates of heaven. It's because people don't understand. They don't know what the truth is. And they're so sidestepped and they're so interested in everything else but their own lives and improving their own lives. They just want to be distracted because this world has gotten so crazy. It really has, Jason. And it's wild because when you start talking about astral projection, I get excited. I'm like, there's this whole new adventure I haven't been on. It's like going on like a retreat or going to Machu Picchu or the pyramids for first. It's like a new adventure and I'm interested. So I guess for our listeners out there, you are an author. And I wanted to give you a little bit to talk about a book that you put out just recently. And I see also you are speaking at Contact in the Desert, which, by the way, is a very cool event. Something interesting. I went there a couple years ago, and I believe I got a picture of Mayorkas. The head of Department of Homeland Security was there. And I was like, what the heck is he doing there? And like, obviously the government has some interest in what's going on at Contact in the Desert. We didn't even get into the missing scientists and, your thoughts on that. I don't know. I'm sure you have some thoughts on why those scientists have gone missing because you started talking a little bit about interdimensional deities. Like, is that what aliens are by the end of the day, interdimensional deities, or are some of them in this physical realm? It's a combination of both.
Well, I think the best conspiracy of them all is that they are extra dimensional. So they exist there. Maybe they could manifest here, but not physically in your mind. So you can see them in the room as a physical being, but someone else could walk in the room and they won't be able to see them. So they're manipulating your mind into seeing it. And I think the greatest conspiracy in the world, if it's true, is that the governments want you to believe that this is a physical thing when it's not.
So let's talk about Astral Genesis. What can readers find in this masterpiece? It looks like you put out quite a few books, and I'm going to have to definitely read some of your writing because I have not experienced it. I would like to astral project at least once in my life to be like, yeah, I did it. It's like getting on the roller coaster. It might be for the wrong reasons, Jason. I'm just telling you, but I'm interested. And you wrote a book called Astral Genesis, the astrological keys to the gods.
Yes. And what that book is about is basically doing the whole astro-theology thing where it goes back to the ancient myths and basically understanding that the makeup of the stars and the cycles were translated into the gods. And when you go back to the ancient texts, it literally says, go visit Osiris, which is Orion. Go visit your, Atum or Geb, who's in the northern sky. Like, it literally tells you in these ancient texts that these gods are the stars. And when you die, you go and pass through them. And as you pass through this cycle, you become those gods as you pass through that kind of star realm. Now, so that's where that book comes in. And it kind of gets into this deeper meaning of the ancient texts were really an encoding of the stars and the cycles that we experience. I'm actually working on a new book that I believe I finished today before the show.
Well, I mean, so it's funny. It's alignment, and it's interesting because, you mentioned just the Egyptians. The pyramids, it was alleged they were initiation locations. And why is that? And why did they have holes that looked like went right through the pyramids that you could see certain constellations at certain times of the year? They believed this stuff. This was their religion, their belief. It's very interesting.
Yes. And I think that I don't know what it is, or a broken telephone or something, but I think over the past 2,000 plus years, I would even say over the past 3,000 years, this information has been stripped from us. And these myths and stories and religious texts, they've been taken literally when they encode incredible information of the stars and who we are and the cycles of time. So right now, I just finished a book on Plato and his writings, and how I believe he encoded basically Egyptian star lore through a Greek lens into his writings, and how he basically mapped the cosmos and hid it in certain stories. So that's my new book, which hopefully will come out this month or next month.
No, it makes complete sense. I know on May Day we were talking about Adam Weishaupt and his obsession with Plato. And Plato, Plato's was it New Republic, I believe?
The Republic.
The Republic, that's what it was called. The Republic. Just like that was his model for his beliefs of a global government or a new world order per se. Although he may have not used those exact terms, new world order, but the media sure did in the 1700s when you pull up the newspapers. But he was obsessed with Plato, and I think that it's very interesting that Plato would borrow then some of his intelligence from Greek mythology, or not Greek, Egyptian mythology. Because I sometimes I wonder if the Greek were predecessors to the Egyptians, just because I believe, what is it? Was it called Gigantus, the original Greek island of the Titans? And then he learned about these Titans that may have lived in the past, of giant human skeletons and effigy mounds and everything else. Like we see a lot of that here in Wisconsin with the effigy mounds and the skeletons that were unearthed locally. They had large skeletons, some between 9 and 15 feet tall. At least that's what the news reported. But you hear about this idea of giants and giantism and the early Greek world and the Greek gods. And the question is who was first, the Greek or the Egyptians? Because the Greeks had their stories of Cyclops and all these other very interesting ancient mythology that I wonder if you had to do a timeline, which was first, at the end of the day.
Oh, well, I would say Egyptian.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I would say is that they borrowed from each other. There was a lot of changing hands of stories, and I don't want to get into it too much, but what I would say is that the motifs, if you look at the structure of certain stories, they follow the exact motifs, the exact signature, step 1 to step 10, that you find in Egypt, that you find in the Greek writings. And then again, you find in the Bible, you find in Samaria, you find in Babylon. It's the same 1 to 10, how to build a story and what symbols to use. And then take those symbols, take those motifs, and then map them to the stars.
So I want to leave our listeners with something very positive. How can astral projection be used in a positive way? To really explore your world? Because we talked a lot about the government MK Ultra segments, and then I just kind of wanted to come full circle and kind of talk about, because you had the ancients who used it and they wanted to, head back to their star that they believed that their energy came from or be part of in the astral realm or astral projection. So when you enter these astral realms, what should your goal be? What can you find there that's enlightenment? And that's not always demons or evil entities,
Well, that's a good way to end it, because there is a lot of positive things. And for me, it's I never guided it, for example. I don't say, I want this, I want to see this. But sometimes in those journeys, I'll see past lives. I'll be able to see other lifetimes, recall memories, receive information, information on what I need to do in my life. So it could be very a guiding principle. And it kind of opens you up to this kind of multidimensional mind, where you're not just physical doing your day-to-day tasks. It's almost like you're connected to this greater organism, this greater divine consciousness that you can tap in and out of and call upon in your times of need. So if you know how to connect, if you know how to go there, and let's say you're in trouble in this world, you can tune into that and find support.
Well, it's interesting because so many different theologies and beliefs have exactly what you discussed right there. Meditation. Some people call it prayer. Some people call it, guided, I would say, like you said, astral projection. And I think at the end of the day, it's having a relationship with the creator, or some people call it Christ consciousness. Some people call it the creator's energy or the grand architect's energy. I'm not a Mason, but like, at the end of the day, it's like looking at this and looking at the oldest, most pure form of what we're talking about. I think we get closer to the more authentic version and the reasons behind it. And I have to agree with you that if you are if you're traveling through these deadly seas of the world that we live in, per se, going day to day without any kind of spiritual guidance, it doesn't hurt. A call out. I talk to people who have reached the end. Whether it's my former co-host, he reached out to. He believed in the Norse gods, and that's what he saw. That changed his life. He's a better person because of it. Like he's like the phoenix reborn from the ashes. There's the story of Horus. That's where we get the term hours from. It's an anagram for Horus. So you have Horus and the 12 followers, and we go by a 12-hour cycle. It's like, you get the knowledge. You learn about these things, and you learn to become a better person. And I'm starting to learn about your higher self, your higher consciousness that is temporarily here so you can level up and go to the next level. And the question is what are you spending your life on this planet doing? At the end of the day, if you're working all day just to get by, how are you furthering your soul and your heart and learning to be a better person to other people and for yourself? And I think at the end of the day, it starts with finding that creator deity, that creator God. And for me, obviously I have my personal beliefs. I try not to push them on other people. They want to know what it is, they can ask, right, at the end of the day. But I think I agree that somewhere along the line, in order to have change, we really need to become reborn or have rebirth. In Christianity, it's baptism, the womb, coming from the womb again, the water, right? Everything's maritime law. We learned from Jordan Maxwell. And Phoenix rising from the ashes. And then the Romans borrowed that from the Egyptians.
Yeah, I love it. Exactly. So it's always about bettering yourself. What could you bring to this world to better others? And if everybody was like that, we'd have a much better world.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rundown Live, Milwaukee's Independent News and Talk Radio. We're running out of time, but I have to ask you, what are you reading, man? I love books, and I see you have a lot of books on your bookshelves. What are some of the things that you enjoy reading when you're down?
Well, all I can say is I've been repeatedly reading Timaeus by Plato.
Okay.
That's because I'm working on it. So I've been repeatedly going over that entire thing for the past couple months.
All right, Jason, where can people find your stuff? Where can they purchase your book? And where can they find out more about you? Because I know you're going to be speaking at Contact in the Desert. Maybe we can give some information on that as well.
Sure. You can go to thecrystalsun.com. That's where everything I put out is, including crystals. I'm connected to the Auralite 23 mine here in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And I'm going to be releasing a new book soon. You're the first person to actually hear me say those words.
No, that's cool. That's bring it abracadabra, right? What you say and you create. There you go.
So I was going to surprise people, hopefully before or after Contact in the Desert. I'm just going to show up with a new book. So I won't announce what that book is yet, but it is coming. And at Contact in the Desert, I'm going to be discussing the contents of that new book, and I'm going to be discussing astral travel and the entities and worlds you find out of your body.
Jason Quitt, thanks again for joining us. You're a great guest. We'll have to have you back on soon, and maybe I'll catch you at Contact this year. I usually go to cover the events and interview people, but don't know if I'll make it this year. We'll find out. But that being said, if I don't, I'm sure I'll bump into you someplace else sometime soon. And thanks for joining us on the Rundown Live. You guys are listening to the Rundown Live. I'm Kriston T. Harris. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. You're listening to us on Ground Zero Plus. And don't forget to support this broadcast. You can donate and be part of the May fundraiser live and still get into the raffle for a free annual subscription to Ground Zero Plus. Any donation you make, I will match leading up to Friday. You guys stay blessed and have a good night. I'm Kriston T. Harris, signing off.
You're listening to the Rundown Live with Kriston T. Harris.